China is leaning in to the Trump trade war narrative right now. They have just put in new trade restrictions with the United States, saying that they will not export germanium or gallium to our country. Now, you probably never heard what germanium or gallium is in your entire life. Well, I promise you, it's extremely important for the future. These are two items that are in a ton of renewable energies, whether renewable energy technologies, whether it be solar cells, whether it be batteries. These things, these two materials are in a lot of things. And China is now saying they're not going to sell to the United States. Does this make you nervous, or do you think the United States is going to be able to get around this?
Yeah, so I was nervous at the beginning. There's a little bit of context for why I'm not so nervous now. Part of it is because China had put looser restrictions on these very elements about a year ago in response to other restrictions on exports of semiconductor technology that the Biden administration had put on. So I was worried then. I was curious how it would go. And what that did, when I looked into it more, is that those initial export restrictions from China, they reduced the amount of germanium and gallium that we have been importing from them basically to zero in the 2024 calendar year.
So we're already de-linked to them with this material.
We've been dealing with this. And so I couldn't really find any more specific information about how we're dealing with this because, to be clear, China is a big miner of these two materials.
We're talking about like 80% of the world gallium supply, 50% of the germanium supply. Like, we're talking about massive amounts of these materials.
Yeah, exactly. And even bigger, like refiners of them.
Well, that's important because these two materials aren't rare earth materials because they're not mined. These two materials are byproducts of producing something else. So germanium and gallium are byproducts of producing zinc and producing aluminum. And if that's the thing, yes, of course, China does produce the most amount of zinc in the world and it does produce the most amount of aluminum in the world. But, Canada produces aluminum. The United States produces aluminum.
Yeah.
Other countries produce zinc. So if we need to get these new materials out of that zinc and aluminum production that's already happening, yes, we can build up that capacity. It'll take about 6 months' time. There may be pain, but but what we know now is we haven't been importing these things for a year from China, right? We haven't been linked to them.
And like, as I think about that further, maybe it is a massive problem and it's just been kept under wraps because it's a problem for DOD and DOD doesn't need to advertise that it's a problem.
Maybe.
But I don't think we should assume that it's a problem. We should at least take it as good that we haven't heard about it being a major problem.
I agree. And I also think that I think China's move is bad. Okay. I don't just think it's bad for whatever. I think it's bad for their strategy. Even on their terms, really? I think it's a bad move. Because if they want to start making the fight for resources like this a part of the future climate trade war, they'll lose that fight. Because the vast majority of silicone in the entire world comes from North Carolina. And so, okay, China, you want to stop with your gallium? We won't give you silicone.
Yeah.
You might not. You might stop us from producing solar cells from an 8-month time span. Instead of now, it's got to take us a year. Well, we're not going to let you make computers anymore because we're not going to ship silicone to you. Right. So if they start making that a part of the trade war, I think they lose at that fight.
Sure. I wonder if maybe they have a calculus that if they respond with a bazooka, we will continue to respond with pistols. Because the way that the Biden administration has been handling export restrictions,
it's been like a sniper.
Yes. I mean, the way they describe it is small yard, high fence. They've been targeting specific Chinese companies that can't be exported to, and only very specific products that you can't export. I am not super caught up on like how big of an effect, like what the recent data says about the effect that this is having on their production capacity.
Yeah, because China's having so many other problems with their production capacity. It's almost like inconsequential to the larger problems that they're facing.
Sure, right? At least on an economic perspective. Yes. But as far as a military perspective, I'm not quite sure. But I do think that one thing that it would make sense for China to fear with the Trump administration is someone pointing a bazooka wildly around and being willing to hit anything with their rockets.
Yeah, and as someone who is like somewhat of I shouldn't even say someone who is a China hawk, who wants to see the United States, defeat China in the next century, not militarily, but economically and influentially, I wouldn't hate a president who says, yeah, no more silicone to you if you're going to restrict our materials here.
Yeah.
Right? Having someone who's willing to go that far might be a good thing in that case.
Yeah, it's a hard escalatory game to play.
Yes,
because
then you're like,
because going too fast up that ladder hurts us really bad.
It also does. Yes, and it also, it pushes them so far into a corner, like what else can they do other than attack? It's almost like us restricting oil to Japan prior to Pearl Harbor. They had no choice but to attack us at that point because we restricted their oil supply, so they had nowhere else to go.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's similar to that. It's getting weary out there.